techniques used in a remake from different eras of film history. So for this, I've looked at Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 11 from 1960 and 2001. They're very different films. The only thing that's the same is the character Danny Ocean and the plot. They're robbing a casino, but apart from that, the genres are slightly different. The first one's a bit more of a comedy, the second one is more of a crime. So the development of editing technology, the development of editing practice, and very briefly at genre-specific editing techniques. So without going into too much detail, the 1960s film was most likely going to be done linear. This was the most common practice for that time, and just due to the editing techniques used, this was the conclusion I came to. And then moving forward to 2001 film, it went from non-linear to digital, and this is very obvious when we go on to look at editing techniques in the next couple of slides. The quality in the edit and the creativity of the edit are far more advanced in 2001, which makes sense due to the technology. And Soderbergh, the director of the 2001 film, was able to be far more creative with this technology that's now available to him due to the advent of digital technology. We can see this very briefly through the use of lighting and the speed of clips. So as we can see in the top left picture, we've got Danny Ocean discussing robbery. They've used a lot of contrasting light and dark, which is called the chiaroscuro effect, which is Italian for literally meaning light dark. We see this a lot in film noir films of the 40s and 50s era. It suggests mystery, suspicion, and when you compare it to the picture on the right, it's a much flatter image, and it's a more light-hearted scene as well. Looking at speed, how we view speed differently. In the first clip, we've got an increase of speed. It shows Las Vegas, it's very sped up, suggests commotion, activity, excitement. The second scene, he's decreased the speed, it's very distorted, he's removed frames. In this scene, a con man is conning a gentleman, and it just matches his confusion. And in the last scene, he used a freeze frame, which I believe is to accentuate the audio at the top. Sped up. Distorted, remove frames here, which does suggest distortion and confusion. And then finally, in the last scene, use the freeze frame.
He got 2 steps closer to the door than any living soul before him.
So now we've looked at the technology, it's important to touch on the shot length. As we now know how they were cutting the films, we can now look at the different lengths they use. So the average shot length in contemporary films is argued that it is shorter than average shot length in old films. I wasn't able to do this research. If I had had more time, I might have looked at more films and seen if this was true. But due to the advent of digital, shots are increasingly shorter. Found a quote which says films cut traditionally have an average shot length of 5.15 seconds compared to 4.75 seconds. Electronically cut film. So I wanted to see if this was the same for my films chosen. I came to the conclusion that yes, this was true. The 1960 film had an average shot length of 20 seconds. This was taken from only 5% of the film. Again, if I was to conduct my research more in depth, I would watch the whole film and count all shots. And the 2001 film, 6.5 seconds. So it is in keeping with the theory. Now that we know the average shot length, we can look at the cutting tempo. So it's a much faster cutting rate in Ocean's 11, 2001, which is evident when watching. Long takes tend to slow down the pace, whereas fast takes obviously speed up. And due to it being an action crime, this makes sense to have more cuts than a romance or a drama. However, Milestone in 1960 didn't ignore this editing technique, despite him having longer shot lengths. We can see in the next clip that he has actually upped the rate of cuts. So in these two scenes, we have a fight scene from the first film and a fight scene from the second film, and on watching, it looks like Milestone has a much slower pace.
First he comes around begging for a job, now he's dumping paying customers. Let's get that bum out of here. Okay, Al. Now, what's that, you boys?
And then we move on to the 2001 film, whereby you'll see by the use of handheld cameras and fast cuts, it increases the drama and heightens the action. So it's obvious that Soderbergh achieves a much more chaotic scene. However, when comparing the average shot length, he's actually used 4 times more cuts in those 30 seconds than he's used in his entire film. So he has sped up his average shot length, but only when comparing it to the 2001 film, it looks like it's a much slower pace. But he has used the average shot length to heighten action compared to the rest of his film. So now I've looked at cutting tempo and looked at transitions as another editing technique. The one similarity they both have is their use of transitions. Milestone loves to dissolve, while Soderbergh uses plenty of wipes and slides. The one thing they use differently is that Milestone uses his dissolves to signify the end of a scene or the passing of time, whereas Soderbergh likes to put a wipe in the middle of a scene, which adds dynamic, a bit of interest. As we can see in these examples here, we've got a very obvious dissolve, very slow paced, it goes on, and then we've got wipes and slides here.
What about drivers? Talk
So in between scenes, he's using slides just to add a bit more interest. He tends to choose these over a straightforward cut. I'm not going to play all of these clips just due to time, but he's also far more adventurous with his transitions. He uses graphic match, whip pans, which is when it blurs round to focus on another thing, and he uses whip pans in place of eyeline matches, so he'll whip round to where the character's looking and then whip back again, which I thought was quite interesting. And he loves a good montage, but I'm not going to play all of those. Milestone also experimented. We've got a very crude parallel action, but we understand what he's trying to convey. We've got all 5 con men in 5 different casinos at the same time. Just due to the audio, it doesn't quite work, but we know the message he's trying to get across. And similarly, his use of invisible cuts, so he's trying to disguise the cut with a balloon. Again, not quite seamless, but he is definitely experimenting with technology. But I just wanted to show you Soderbergh's use of invisible cuts in 2001, and we can just see how the technology is developed. So Saul walks off the screen, it reveals the new scene. Similarly, he walks into the casino, and as he passes a group of people, he's inside the casino. And thirdly, one of the final scenes, the editor cleverly uses the use of black to disguise the transition between each scene. And finally, one final technique they both use is the use of text. Milestone in 1960 has the challenge of trying to demonstrate all 5 con men in all 5 casinos simultaneously. While Soderbergh uses a lot of text on the screen, as we can see in the pictures, this is to signify location change. Milestone achieves it through the mise-en-scene, so the scene arrangement, as we can see in the next clip, how he's achieved it. So as the truck pulls into the casino, we've got the casino name, and then similarly he pulls into another casino with the casino name, and again, and he does this for all 5 of the casinos. Every time it changes scene to a different casino, he will show the truck driving in and showing the name of the casino. And similarly, while they're robbing, the name of the casino is on the vault door. So we know exactly which casino they're in without using text on the screen. So just briefly, looking at genre-specific editing techniques, I wanted to see if those techniques identified were specific to the genres identified, which were crime and comedy. And just due to time constraints, I just focused on one specific technique for each genre. So for crime, I chose to look at timing and cutaways. So as we've established, timing is key to build suspense and heighten the action, and we use cutaways to show the viewer potential problems, maybe before the character's even seen them himself. For example, the shower scene in Psycho, which we all know of, the links in the bibliography, if you want to have a look. And for comedy, I looked at reaction shots, so using the shots of the characters for comedic effect, their response to what's going on in the scene. For example, in Pink Panther, also from the 60s, link again from the bibliography. So just having a look at some examples. Looking at suspense, we've got Josh driving towards a roadblock, we cut away from the roadblock, back to him, he's got all the money in the truck, so it's building suspense that he's about to be caught. And similarly, in the second film, we've got again in the box with the case on top, he's about to knock the case off, which is going to set the alarms off. He doesn't know the case is there, the viewer does, so we have a cutaway to the case about to slide down and set off the alarms. The shots are a lot longer in the scene compared to the rest of the film as well, showing that he's used timing and the sound to build suspense. And then just looking at comedy and reactions, they've just found out that the money, which is in a coffin, is about to be cremated, and it shows their obvious dismay looking along the road using one long shot and all of their reactions.
In sure and certain hope of the resurrection unto eternal life. The Lord lift up his face upon you.
So very exaggerated acting, which is quite specific to the era that this was filmed in the 60s. And then moving on to the second film, he asks a very obvious question.
Yeah, well, say we do all that. We're just supposed to walk out of there with $150 million in cash on us without getting stopped?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
So long shots. For comedic effect. You get the impression that they're all in disbelief to carry out the heist. So in summary, the conclusion I came to was that editing has developed in terms of technology and seamlessness, but the motivation remains the same. They're using the same techniques they were using back in the 60s to this day. The only thing that differs is the technology and the way that we're able to make it more invisible and more seamless. Contemporary films continue to explore, the basics remain the same, and just going back to the genre-specific editing techniques, they've been tried and tested and they work, hence why we see the same examples from the 60s to 2001 film. If I was to conduct my research a bit differently, I might have watched more films from the 60s and again more films from the noughties. But that was the conclusion I came to looking at those two films, and these are the sources I used: films, books and websites. That concludes the presentation.
That was bang on 10 minutes, just in case you're wondering what a 10-minute presentation looks like.
I was Russian.
Thank you very, very much, Daisy. Matt, if you would like to set up